Want to know a no BS approach to making sure that you're not being manipulated, to not being polarized by the media, by people, friends, and family around you? Keep watching, because That's Interesting is something that you need to learn. Welcome to the R.Y.S.E Movement podcast, a place where men just like you learn to raise your standards everywhere. I just realized, speaking this out loud, this is an extremely philosophical episode. And I'm probably going to put this part in the beginning because it's a bit of a disclaimer. If you're not interested in philosophy, if you're not interested in linguistics and language patterns and understanding polarity between one another and the intimacy and tension and connection that's inside of it, this episode might go over your head and it might be a little bit boring. That being said, let's jump straight back into it. Welcome to another episode of the R.Y.S.E Movement podcast. I'm Dave, and in today's episode, we're talking all about how to remain steadfast into who you are, not getting polarized, not getting pissed off, not getting taken back and forth and left to right and all these different things that are going on at the moment. So the reason why this is so important is because you need to be the one that has domain and control and responsibility over who you are. You are the one who chooses to feel your emotions. No one can make you feel anything. However, technology, media, politicians, they like to use language and linguistics to get under your skin. They like to use things that they know is going to press an emotional button so that they can get a reaction. We've seen this since the dawn of time. Humans have been doing this. The moment that we started making noises out of our face, we became able to influence and manipulate other people's perspectives. The reason why we want to stop this is because you have control over your dominion. You have control and autonomy and sovereignty over who you are. No one can make you feel anything. No one can make you think anything. You're the one who has to do that, whether you do it voluntarily or subconsciously. The reason why we want to get these things under control and to be able to step back and assess and respond instead of react allows us to come from higher consciousness. It allows us to come from higher levels of thinking that stops us from getting drugged down into the mud and go through all of the filth that's associated with highly polarized people. So there's nothing wrong with being polarized. There's no right or wrong here. This is the only time that I'm ever going to say that there is no objective truth in this matter, because it's all up to your perspective. My perspective is that whenever something happens in the external world from me, when I'm talking about my psychology, my emotions, and these sorts of things, I'm not going to jump in their side of the boat. I'm not going to get polarized. I'm not going to say things are good or bad. I'm going to say that's interesting. The reason why I say that's interesting is because I'm not one to get polarized. I want to sit and remain as impartial as possible. I want to make sure that my view and my perception is always up to me. And if something is trying to color my perspective, then I need to be aware of it and see it for what it is, rather than allow it to be infecting into my mind. So, perfect example. Look what happened a couple of years ago. The craziness that happened, all of the, fighting over toilet paper and, the rest of the groceries and all these sorts of things, the giving up of rights, the debates, the fucking arguments, everything else that happened was because people were so easily misled for the simple reason that they were at home and they were glued to this fucking device that's sitting in your hand right now, and you were taught what to think. You weren't taught to question it. If you did question it, you were labeled as a conspiracy theorist, as an anti-vaxxer, as all these other labels that were dehumanizing. And the opposite side did the exact same thing. They dehumanize people by saying that they're sheep, that they're asleep, that they need to wake up. When it comes to what happened a few years ago, I was heavily polarized. When what happened, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't want flags coming up below saying, this banner, this, yeah. I don't want the fact checkers coming out. Whenever it comes to being polarized, you're blind to opposite perspectives. The analogy that I use is you're two inches from the problem, the scenario, whatever's going on. And you've also got the blinders on. They're stopping you from seeing any other perspective. And whenever it comes to anything that may be labeled as good, bad, positive, negative, whatever, you need to be able to step back and you need to be able to view it as objective as possible. So I always talk about the ability to respond instead of react. Whatever stimulus happens, there is a gap. There is always a gap in whatever moment that you see, regardless of what your consciousness, what your mind is trying to color it as. And the thing here is you need to make sure that you are using that gap to the best of your ability so that you can get as many facts and pieces of information together so that you can color your own perspective. If you're not, and if stimulus happens and you react, you lose that time to be able to assess, to be able to zoom out and to see another perspective. Like I say a lot of the time on the podcast, when it comes to Albert Einstein's, one of his lesser known quotes, you can't solve a problem from the same level of mind that created it. And so when it comes to that saying there and zooming out, it offers you a different perspective. So if you've got a problem and that's at this level here, let's call it chest height, and you're intimately aware with the problem, with the obstacle, with how hard it is, and you've got to go through it, under it, around it, you've got to learn from it in some way, shape, or form. If you were to only zoom out a little bit and to see what is the solution that I'm not able to see, you would be able to ask better questions, get better answers. We've spoken about this on the podcast before. At the same time, it also allows you to be able to see what's another perspective for going over it, going around it, learning from it, whatever it is. When you say that's interesting, it sparks something in the mind. Because what does that's interesting actually mean? It means that there's something to look at here. It means that there's something that is allowing me to bring some curiosity to it. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It just means that it's interesting. Things that are good can also be interesting. Things that are bad can be interesting as well. So when it comes to people trying to pull you into their side of the fence and, be polarized and be on our team versus that team, and, it's so easy to other people, you can step back and go, that's interesting. I will let you do what you want to do and I will do what I want to do. And how about we call it even? Like the idea behind getting polarized into teams as us versus them allows communication to break down. It allows intimacy to break down, and it causes you discomfort and disharmony inside. When you are in this emotional dysregulation, and if you've got kids, you know what it's like to see kids go through emotional dysregulation. You know what it's like inside of your own body. If you're polarized, you're not neutral. You are polarized either euphoria and happiness, or you're going to be polarized with anger, sadness, shame, fear, guilt, resentment, betrayal, whatever negative emotions you want to call it. That is not going to allow you to have clear thinking. When you're emotional, you're in a different part of the mind that's not allowing you to see objective reality, to be able to zoom out and to see what's another perspective that I'm not able to see. And the big thing that we got to talk about here is if you're polarized by friends, by family, by your political affiliations, by your sporting teams, by whatever polarizes you, you are blind to your unconscious biases. You're blind to your blind spots. You have no ability to be able to zoom out and see in what way, shape, and form am I seeing this wrong? In what way, shape, and form am I doing this wrong? You need to be able to be as objective as possible. And I say this knowing very well how tightly wound my biases are. There's a lot of things that I think and a lot of things that I believe that I have to try and uproot the presuppositions, things that I pre-assume about these things so that I can get a better world-rounded perspective. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be done overnight. However, as long as I continually upgrade and raise my standards, as we always talk about here, I'm going to be able to be as objective as possible and to go through everything in my mind. And if it doesn't serve me, it gets rid of. So the big thing what we want to look at is, are you able to step back from whatever your perspective is, whatever the perspective that they're trying to polarize you with, and see an alternate perspective that may even be an opposite, and then make a amalgamation and a blending of all of them? Because like this book behind me here, this book here, the Tao Te Ching, this book here it's a book of paradox. There's not one right way. There is balance. It is, the symbol of the Tao, the symbol of the yin yang. So I'll put that over here. The symbol of the yin yang is light and darkness. It's a little bit of good and a little bit of bad. It's chaos and order. There is a little bit of order inside of chaos, and there's a little bit of chaos inside of order. And the line that connects the two is the Tao. It's the eternal Tao. It's the thing that is older than God itself. It's actually one of the lines that's inside of the book, the Tao Te Ching. When it comes to polarities, when it comes to seeing in the yin yang, too much black, too much white, too much chaos, too much order, you're going to be blindsided by the opposite side. You want to remain as impartial as possible so that you can see the best perspective possible. And the best perspective is understanding that there's multiple positions. One of my things that I did recently with one of my clients here, I'll show you the workbook. She is dealing through some things. This is it here. So I drew out a diagram based on the emotions, and we might go through this in the podcast. It'll have to be a visual one because you guys will need to see exactly what I'm writing down, but we'll stick with this for the moment. I wrote down this diagram and I got her to step into different perspectives and literally walk around my office in different perspectives so she can see things from a different view. One of the greatest things that you can do whenever it comes to like that term that's interesting is someone offers you something, someone says something to you, could be polarizing, could be some information, and you sit back and go, that's interesting. Get up, walk around the table and have a look at another perspective to see if you're wrong, to see if they're right, to see if they're right, but you're also right, and that there could be a blending of the two together. I just realized speaking this out loud, this is an extremely philosophical episode. And I'm probably going to put this part in the beginning because it's a bit of a disclaimer. If you're not interested in philosophy, if you're not interested in linguistics and language patterns and understanding polarity between one another and the intimacy and tension and connection that's inside of it, this episode might go over your head and it might be a little bit boring. That being said, let's jump straight back into it. When you are worrying about your biases, when you're worrying about other people's perspectives and not getting caught into their side and remaining as impartial as possible, it gives you power and domain and sovereignty over who you are. It allows you to be able to take information as it's presented to you and see if it actually sits with your worldview. And if it doesn't, there could be something there for you to learn from. Your worldview is inherently wrong. Human beings, we live a subjective life. Even the most educated, the most enlightened, the most integrated people in this world will fuck up from time to time because they have their own biases. No one is 100% conscious of all their unconscious. I'll say that again. No one is ever 100% conscious of all of their unconscious. There's just too much to know. And so if you're doing your best to try and be a good human and integrate your traumas and heal and just become a better person, you're already ahead of the curve. If you're already trying to see that it's not us versus them, it's we're all the exact same, we're all humans, regardless of race, regardless of culture, regardless of religion and creed and political affiliations and socioeconomic status, we are all the exact same. And understanding that paradigm that regardless of all of those characterizations there and ideologies there, we are the exact same, we are all one. And every single person's perspective is valid. And we need to be able to have open communication and to be able to see things as interesting, and see things with a spark of curiosity, that childlike curiosity, so that we can create this, overarching worldview that is as objective truth as possible. Because there's over 8 billion people on this planet. Not one of us has the perfect perspective. Not one of us has the ability to foresee into the future and to see what is actually objectively right. The thing is, we've got social media, we've got, Twitter. What's Twitter these days? X. We've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, TikTok, we've got all these different platforms, YouTube as well, to be able to have an open discussion, like a town hall discussion. And that's for all of us that are privileged enough to be able to have access to technology. We can create discussions to be able to make sure that we're not just chimpanzees slinging shit at one another. We're creating we're creating a more beautiful world that we all know that's possible, and borrowing that from Charles Eisenstein. That world is 100% possible, but it's up to us to stop the division. It's up to us to make sure that everyone's perspectives is warranted and valid, and that we can amalgamate some kind of objective truth from everyone's subjective experience. There is objective up and down. However, at the same time, it's also subjective, because here I am in Australia in the down under, and this is the southern hemisphere, this is the down portion. But at the same time, if you keep heading down, eventually you're going to rotate back up and you're going to be up. So whenever it comes to your perspective, just know that it's flawed. Just know that with the way that you view the world through is only partial truths. We need to get as objective truth as possible. And the way that we do that is by saying that's interesting. Bring curiosity to your life, bring curiosity into everything. If you see something that you immediately label as bad, go, ooh, why did I label that as bad? Okay, What are the presuppositions? What are the things that I am pre-assuming about these things that I've already labeled this thing as bad? You know, talk about politics. Everyone talks about politics and they go, oh, instantly bad. Okay, what are the goods from politics? What are the goods from religion? What are the goods from, you know, like Christianity, Islam, you know, all these different ideologies and religions and stuff? What are the good? What are the bad? And to be able to figure out what is the most objective worldview that we have. That's how we can get along. That's how we can make our life better. And to talk like the R.Y.S.E movement, to raise your standards everywhere, this is a really important thing to raise your standards when it comes to communication. Is to be able to make sure that you're not being polarized. Because if you're polarized, you're not centered, you're not balanced, you're not poised. And I'll give you guys a little insight. That spot right in the middle of this diagram here, that is presence, that is no time, that is no polarity, it just is. It is the undying, unrelenting present moment. And it is absolutely beautiful. So, that's enough from today. That's where we're going to wrap it up. I hope you have gotten something out of this. I felt like I needed to bring some philosophy to the podcast because this has been rummaging in my mind for quite a while. It's one of the things that I think about quite often. Remaining as objective as possible, stepping back, saying that's interesting to things that are outside of your worldview, outside of your perspective, and then having open, clear communication about it so that you can understand and update your worldview and so others can do the exact same. Anyway, that's enough. Much love. Take care. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you for subscribing and leaving a review. It really helps us out. Until next time, take care and much love.